Kathleen Wynne walked into the Ontario legislature just before 10 o'clock this morning. Unlike the day before, the Premier entered the building with added legitimacy. She is now the first female Premier in Ontario history to win an election and the first rookie leader in 43 years to win an election. Joining us now to tell us what the results mean for Ontario, Cyria Grell, former Deputy Director of Communications for Premier Wynne. Paul Rhodes, former Communications Director for the Ontario PC Party. Marit Stiles, NDP strategist. Ben Pauley, former Green Party candidate, and Martin Regcon, Ontario politics columnist with the Toronto Star. Everybody get a good night's sleep last night? How are we feeling? Not too bad. Let's take a look at what happened last night. Sheldon, if you would, the numbers please. The Liberals went into last night's campaign at dissolution with 48 seats. They ended up with 59 for plus 11 on the night. Conservatives started with 37, down to 27, off 10. NDP, status quo, except, of course, they no longer hold the balance of power because it's a majority government. And the Greens still waiting for that breakthrough. No seats last night for the Green Party. Let's go party by party here. Siri, starting with you, of course. The Liberals won a majority government, but with 38% of the total votes. What should they not infer from that victory?
Can I start with what they should infer?
Well, we know what they should infer. They get to govern uninhibited for the next 4 years. What should they not interpret this to mean?
I'm just going to say it. I think they should infer it as an amazing articulation of what people in this province want their government to do, with the role they want it to play. I think they should interpret it as support for their leader, who is, obviously people connect to her in a really real way. And the role that they want government to have in their lives, right? That they want the government to invest in them, they want them to take care of them, they want them to talk about the issues that matter. What they shouldn't infer is that the hard part's done. I think that the hard part is just starting for them. I think, to me, there are amazing politicians who emerge on the campaign trail, but the true brilliant leaders are shown through governing, right? And I think that now is the time to really show that they can take control of the government and that they can implement their plan in a way that makes a real difference and that it's done in a smart, efficient manner.
Paul, they won. They've got 4 years to do what they want. What should they not infer from last night's win?
Well, I think they should not infer that a lot of the issues Tim Hudak was discussing during the course of the campaign about debt, about deficit, the size of government, the need to balance budget, the need to hold the line on taxes, are suddenly all swept away. Tim raised those issues. He talked about them in a very bold and dramatic fashion, and they didn't vanish last night. They still have to be dealt with, and the options are for any government quite limited when it comes to dealing with them.
Marit, how about you?
Well, I think that, this is clearly, to the point in your question, not exactly a majority vote, right? I mean, this is a problem we have with our current first past the post system. So I think it is definitely a clear majority, and the Liberals, I think, were sent a very strong signal that people want the kind of progressive change that's represented in their budget, and that they're going to have to continue down that path. And I hope that they stick to it, because I think, unfortunately, that a lot of the commitments that were made as well, I think over the next few years, they're going to have trouble paying for some of that. I think that is going to be a reality for this government, and I'm afraid of what we're going to see in terms of, I think, what we didn't hear about in this election campaign.
Ben.
Well, I think that we heard Premier-elect Wynne last night say that she has a mandate, but it's not a pan-Ontario mandate. So aside from the percentage that we've already just discussed, it's a pretty stark map in terms of red, blue, and orange, and lack of green, with islands of red in urban centres and blue in rural. So it's really, there's an extremely strong rural-urban divide, and I would think that that's one of the things that they're going to have to look to going forward, is that they're not going to be able to progress if they aren't paying attention to rural needs.
Martin.
I don't think she should infer that the centre doesn't matter, the broad centre of the Ontario electorate. She won a successful campaign by tacking left and trying to deposition the NDP on the left as well. So she ran a fairly left-leaning progressive campaign that was perhaps music to my ears. It's no secret I'm kind of that way. But we shouldn't forget that there was a broad center in this electorate that nobody really spoke to. Tim Hudak certainly did not speak to that broad center. I think the second takeaway is that she should not infer that people don't care about scandals. That might sound slightly contrarian, because I've argued that you shouldn't cast your vote on the basis of a gas plant scandal, boondoggle, e-health, Orange, whatever, because those ought not to be vote-determining issues. But I think people do care. The media certainly care. Media loves scandals, for better or for worse.
Sells papers.
And the Star has led the way on some of them, like Orange, for example.
Yep.
But I think you need to, while they may not throw you out of office, and there's certainly not enough to allow an opposition to win office, people do care, and she has to keep her eye on the ball because it's a $120 billion government operation and lots more delegated authorities like Orange and other things that you have to take control of.
I wonder, Siri, and I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to any of your former colleagues since the election results were known, but I wonder if one of their conclusions is, we got away with these scandals. We've dealt with it now. It's history. We move on.
Well, I think she indicated today that she's going to bring back the Justice Committee looking at the gas plant situation, and I don't think that's the takeaway at all. I think there's always been a real sense in the Liberal Party and in the government that that was a serious situation that needed to be dealt with for all of Ontario. Right? I don't think anyone was being naive about the real implications of that situation. And no, I think that they know that the people sided with the idea that it had been dealt with, that the people who are responsible for that situation are no longer in the government, and they decided to give her a chance. But I don't think that they have any slightest idea that they can do it again, or that it doesn't matter, or that the real sort of mechanics of government and how you spend people's money doesn't matter.
Paul, let me get you on this, because the fact is Dalton McGuinty's gone. This is now Kathleen Wynne's Liberal Party. She has put new processes in place to deal with the malfeasance surrounding the gas plants issue. The guy who led the way on the contempt hearings for the Conservatives, Rob Leone from Cambridge, lost his seat last night. Would the Liberals be wrong to infer, okay, this is history, we move on?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for Kathleen Wynne, if she chooses to take it, to put more distance between her and the previous regime. The Justice Committee, the Liberals will have a majority on it. I think you can watch that very carefully to see how she's going to deal with that past event. But from here on out, any scandals belong to her, and how she reacts to them will be the judge of what will happen in Ontario for the next 4 years. I think the public said, look, we're prepared to forgive you for this, maybe not your former leader, and the options that are put in front of us instead of the gas plant, Mars, whatever scandal is on the agenda, were just not palatable to us at this point.
Do you think, and we come back to this C word all the time now, when Andrea Horwath made a decision in the campaign to call the Liberal Party corrupt, and Kathleen Wynne, you're at the center of the corruption, her words, the people of Ontario have apparently rendered their verdict on that, and they want her back anyway. So maybe you guys were wrong to play that card?
Well, I mean, I think it was risky, for sure. On the other hand, I think there were a lot of people in Ontario who would have called it that. And I think, I know voters that I spoke to in the last few weeks, a lot of them did say, I think there's a problem. I think that the McGuinty government had a big problem. I think there's a sense of entitlement in the Liberal Party and government that we must do away with. But I think they were willing to kind of hold their noses and go in that direction. And I don't think they're willing to see it happen again. I think that they're going to hold this government to account. I mean, Kathleen Wynne has to show not just that there's not going to be some great big gas plant scandal, but they have to change the way they govern, to be more accountable to the voters of this province. And so was it risky for Andrea? Yes. And I think at the end of the day, voters said we're willing to accept Kathleen Wynne as our premier once again. But I do think that a lot of that was also people not wanting to vote for Tim Hudak.
Martin.
I think the problem was that she personalized it so much. I watched Andrea Horwath did. I watched your interview with her at this table, I think late last week, and you asked her why she switched mid-campaign from a question of broken promises to corruption. And the fact that she personalized it so much is, I think, the problem that she had. It just didn't ring true, I think, for a lot of people who saw her as a person of apparent probity, Kathleen Wynne, never caught herself with her hand in the cookie jar, and to have been so...
Never had her hand in the cookie jar.
Perhaps I stand corrected then. And she's a jogger, and she does. I don't know that she really does cookies anyway. But
there is no cookie jar. Let's just clarify.
The point is that Andrea Horwath's attack on Kathleen Wynne seemed to come out of nowhere. The personal attack, I mean. Tim Hudak tried it in March, and it floundered when he tried to say that she was involved in or somehow oversaw a criminal act flowing from the OPP investigation. So that was an already discredited strategy. I think in the same way that Tim Hudak was humiliated by the verdict, I think that Andrea Horwath's central campaign accusation was repudiated by the people.
I want to pick up on this word entitlement, though, and Paul, I'll pick your brains on this one, because back when you were part of the Common Sense Revolution, you won the election in '95, coming from third place out of nowhere to win. Then you won re-election, '99, an endorsement of what had transpired previously. And the second Mike Harris term, I think a lot of people observed there was an increasing sense of entitlement among people who had been in power. Once you've been there for a while in the limousines and you get used to it, and you get fat and you get arrogant. It's natural. These guys, it's been 11 years now, and they got another 4 for sure. Do they need to worry about arrogance?
No, because the one thing that Kathleen Wynne has successfully done, and done brilliantly, is she has been able to make the change argument about her. And I think the last time that happened was Bill Davis in 1981, where 71, pardon me. Change became Kathleen Wynne, because the market for change in the last election was quite high. I think it was 60-65%, depending on the polls you looked at.
Higher, 68.
Yeah, so she was change. She was comfortable change. There is, and we know this from the inside baseball of liberal politics, there are a great number of people who were close to McGuinty that have been shown the door, and there are new people who have been brought in. The other thing that Kathleen Wynne has done, and I respect her very much for this, is she has brought in people from other parties to participate in some of the government programs and some of the government advisory boards, including some people who were senior ministers in the Harris administration.
John Snoblin.
John Snoblin is an example, Janet Ecker being another. So in doing this, sort of the door is a little bit more open. And while I regard Kathleen Wynne as a very competent and certainly determined politician, she doesn't seem to have that same unpleasant partisan edge that the previous administration had.
Ben, can I get you on that? Because the Greens made running on getting the stink of arrogance and corruption out of Queen's Park a big part of their platform. You concerned about it?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that we didn't use the term corruption. Arrogance probably would apply, entitlement too, but mostly that in the course of an election, we didn't actually hear a whole lot of ideas being presented. There were a lot of personal attacks, as have been just described. Effectively, it was a campaign on specific. Sorry, I'm missing my point. What I wanted to bring to the response here was that I'm failing this altogether. Can you?
I'd be happy to
repeat the question.
Go ahead.
Can I speak to the arrogance thing? I think that the issue is not about arrogance. It's no one's in there saying, we won a lot of votes, so we're going to screw this up. I think it's an issue of management, right? The government is a huge, huge organization. There's so many people, there's so much money, there's so much at play. And it's really not about thinking you can get away with things. It's having the capacity to actually get control on it, make sure the right people are in the right jobs, making sure you're attracting the type of people to the bureaucracy, to your political staff, who have the smarts and the ability and the vision to actually run government differently, right? Like we have to, I think the stink is off the leadership. I think she's shown people that she can change, that leadership can change. I think now we have to bring back that air of respect to all of government, right? And that's a bigger challenge.
And I think she can do that.
Yeah.
I think she can do that because I think with her persona, and believe me, I'm no liberal, but she has well, not yet. There is a degree of trustworthiness in her. Like I can't imagine Kathleen Wynne ever saying, well, okay, it's okay for the boyfriend of one of my staff members to come in here and clean the computers. And I mean, that would not sit well with her, I get the sense.
You can imagine others doing it, but not her.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And knowing the people well enough that that doesn't happen on your watch, right? That's the thing. I don't know, you're responsible for the people you bring into government, right? The scandal is very rarely executed by the person at the top of the pecking order, but you have to bring in the right people, and you have to bring in the kind of people who are like her as well, right? Who are going to execute these things in an honourable way.
Martin.
Well, first of all, I do believe you that you're not a liberal, but I do want to say that I thought you were very astute in your analysis of the change that she brought in. Not just herself and her policies, but the people that she brought in. It's a myth that it's the old McGuinty group that's in there. There are some holdover cabinet ministers, but there was a lot of change at the top. And I think it's not just changing people, but changing the culture. Let me just say, though, that going forward, I do think Kathleen Wynne has had an easy ride so far, in the sense that the next phase will be really hard. And she had, by which I mean, she has been mostly promising for the last year and a half, cleaning up, which is hard work, but promising pensions, pay increases, taxes on the rich, and investing in transit, which is, as you argued with her, I think, in her interview, an unfulfilled promise in terms of revenue tools and things that we're really going to...
I'm so delighted you watch this program apparently as much as you do.
On my elliptical, it's on the
That's
PVR.
Wonderful.
So, but the thing is, she has to execute, she has to implement and execute and not screw it up. And that is not as easy as it sounds.
And she has to stop in order to do it, right? She has to slow down. She's been going since the moment she won leadership. It's been right into the throne speech, right into the budget, right into by-elections, right into the fall economic statement. She's been going, her whole government has been going, for a year and a half, and they need to stop, and they really need to take control of what they're in charge of in order to do that.
Let me do one more word on the grits here before we go on and talk about the NDP. Check out the monitors in the studio here, because Sheldon, we're on number 7 here. I want to show a graphic of what happened in Southwestern Ontario. That's what happened before the election. That's a dissolution. Flip it over now, and let's see what happened last night. If you go to the southwestern tip of the province, there's no more Liberal seats there anymore. The Liberals are shut out of Windsor, which is really quite astonishing when you think about the fact this is the part of the province that Sandra Pupatello and Dwight Duncan used to win huge pluralities in their seats. They lost a cabinet minister there last night. Marit, let me just start with you on this one. The NDP owns Windsor now. How does a Liberal government with no seats in southwestern Ontario, in that particular part of southwestern Ontario, how do they represent it at the cabinet table when you guys have got all the seats there now?
Well, I think you have an effective opposition who pushes for policies and the issues that matter to those folks in Windsor. I mean, that's why people elected New Democrats to represent them in Windsor. I mean, they knew they were not electing, frankly, an NDP government, I would argue. They knew they were electing effective opposition. And I think you saw it there in the Southwest. You also saw it in Hamilton and in Sudbury, where we did pick up a few seats. And I think where we kind of are owning those cities a little bit more right now. And those are cities, areas of this province that are feeling the economic hardship, right? So they turned, instead of to the Tories and to sort of the right, they turned to the NDP to represent them, to stand up for them. I think they sense that they do have to hold the Liberals to account, that they need to see some significant change in those areas. And, I believe in opposition. I think if you have an effective opposition, the NDP does this very well, that they can speak up for Windsor. And frankly, the Liberals are going to be desperate to try to win those seats back. They're going to have to try to please people.
I think the greatest thing that happened last night is that the fact that it's a majority, right? And everyone can stop posturing and actually get some stuff done. And I think one of the, you mentioned that the Premier is not as sort of hardcore partisan as some of the former leaders. And I think, Kathleen Wynne and Percy Hatfield can sit down and talk about issues like, I think they'll get along famously when they talk about this stuff.
He's very kind of cute the way he asks questions. He gets up there and he goes, I have a question for the Premier. Good morning, Premier.
Yeah.
How are you?
Former journalist.
And then he lets her have it. Okay, let's move on now. I want to talk about the NDP. NDP had 21 seats before last night. They have 21 seats last night. However, Marit, they lost some real stalwarts. They took a drubbing in Toronto, won some and held some seats by huger margins than they certainly expected to. But here's the question. Andrea Horwath gambled that the public was getting certainly ready to get rid of these guys, and they weren't. She held the balance of power. She no longer does. Did she gamble and lose?
Well, I think that we did make some gains. I mean, if you look at, we didn't pick up more seats than we had, and we certainly lost some, as you point out, very important seats here in Toronto. We did make some gains, and we made some gains in terms of the raw vote, which I think is interesting. And certainly, I think there were, I looked at the results today, and I think it was 42 ridings where we came either first or second. We built some support up in certain areas, but absolutely. I mean, I think that there was a decision made that may have been, maybe some people agree it was the right decision, some don't. I think the most important thing was that it wasn't really the reason for disagreeing with the budget wasn't very effectively communicated. And I think we spent a lot of time in the first couple of weeks of this campaign trying to crawl back up and explain ourselves when we should have been selling our platform, our message, our ideas.
Can I just say, and by the way, when you said people in Windsor weren't electing them to be government, I thought Andrea Horwath kept saying that she was going to be the premier.
But I'm just kidding. By that point, you could see that the polls weren't going to make us government.
To your question, though, I think we have to be a little fair to Andrea Horwath in terms of why she called the election and why it was so hard to convey or communicate that reason. There wasn't a good public policy reason. It was, I think, and I think this has been borne out by the result, of fear that if they didn't go now, it might actually be worse a year from now. The economy recovering, Kathleen Wynne putting more distance between herself and big bad Dalton McGuinty, and asserting herself, getting herself better known amongst people. So go now and give up the balance of power, roll the dice, or go a year from now and perhaps have even more of a taint for having propped up potentially a government, because coalition, junior coalition, or supporting partners often don't do well.
Ben, how do you read it?
Well, we viewed it the same. Effectively, our thought was that the stench of scandal was probably not going to be stronger than at that moment, so you can see that there might be the thought that there was a window of opportunity. What surprised us from our perspective, however, is how Andrea allowed herself to box herself in where there would be no dance partners if there had been a minority government, which I think a lot of people around this table might have thought was going to happen today. However, on the other hand, rather than how she had boxed herself out, now we're talking about how she closed the door altogether. And as you had pointed out, on May 11th, she was holding power and the agenda, as it were, and today, nothing. So in fact, from a Green Party perspective, we may not have the media coverage that the other parties will, but we have precisely the amount of sway that the NDP does for now for the next 4 years.
I think, to me, the unconscionable thing that she did is, I don't think she was wrong to pull the trigger. I don't think she had much of a choice. But you have to follow that up with saying, okay, this is what I'm about. This is what I want to do. And I think that part of the message she was sent last night is that people want you to actually have ideas. They want you to participate in the conversation. I was actually getting a little bit worried for a while that she was doing better and better the less she said about policy. And I think last night people said, no, we want you to have an opinion on transit. We want people to take a stand. It's not enough to just say these sort of populist catchphrases and think that you can actually increase your popular vote. That's not enough. You have to have a vision.
Paul, is there a way to spin this thing for the NDP where they go from holding the balance of power and having a lot of influence on the agenda to being the third place party in a majority parliament, and therefore very little ability to hold the agenda, and that's somehow a better outcome for them?
No, I don't think it's a better outcome for them, but they gambled and they lost. They lost due to factors beyond their control. They came back with the same number of seats. I don't think in anyone's equation, certainly ours, that we would have gone into this election campaign and lost 10 seats to the Liberals. Now, there were I know it was a 10-seat loss. There were a couple to the NDP, at least one I can think of. I don't think that was in anyone's equation, and I think as a result of that, Andrea Horwath played this game to a draw.
Can I just say, though, that while I forgive her for her political calculus, what I think was unforgivable in the minds of many New Democrats, and I've had a problem with, was that she didn't just gamble on losing the balance of power. She gambled on losing a progressive agenda. If Paul had been right and Tim Hudak had won a majority government or a close to minority government, pension plan, gone. Wage increases for home care workers and child care workers, gone. Go down the list of minimum wage and so on, transit, gone. So I think that was a gamble that wasn't worth taking.
But if you said to the NDP before this election started, here's what constitutes a good night, you'd have said, win, you'd have said, come second, you'd have said, hold the balance of power in a minority parliament, you would not have said, same number of seats, have no power going forward, right? Is it not hard to, it just feels very difficult to portray this somehow as a good night for the NDP, even though their vote total went up.
Yeah, but in anyone's equation, I don't think you would have seen that result.
I think you could argue that she made some gains in Southwest Ontario. That would be the best case you could put forward.
What became obvious to me throughout the course of it is that it's not that it was a strategy that was wrong, it was that there was no plan. The longer it went on, I'm like, who do you even have on your team? Like, who is telling you to do this? The thing that surprised me was how unprepared they were. You have at least a year and a half knowing that you're probably going to play this role, and you don't come out of it with an actual plan for the campaign. Like, even the Liberals were able to turn a staff party into their campaign kickoff in 24 hours notice, right? You have to have the people to help you execute it, and it became obvious to me that I don't think she has the support or the advice that she needs.
Mara, almost everybody observed the first week and a half, 2 weeks of the campaign, the NDP appeared to come out flat-footed, which was unusual since they were the only ones who actually knew there was going to be a campaign. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I guess my question is, I think obviously going into this, I thought, before we saw the budget, you're going to have to make a decision to probably go into an election because, as you pointed out, like, it's going to get worse for the NDP. Not better. You're also giving the Conservatives, frankly, an opportunity there the longer this goes on to play that out. So, I would have thought it was a done deal. And certainly, I think that what happened was the budget was a different budget than they expected. I think the Liberals really played a good hand there. That was a very smart political maneuver to put forward a budget like that. And I think that Andrea made a gamble to decide not to reject that budget. Unfortunately, I think that she didn't do a very effective job of explaining why. That message kind of came out gradually, and by that point, the ground game was kind of slowing down, right? So that's a bit unfortunate. The one thing she did do, which I think maybe will be one of the stories coming out of this campaign, and is she did eat away in quite a few ridings into the Tory vote. And in fact, even where we didn't win, frankly, we helped defeat the Tory agenda, right? So I think that might have been part of the story of this election. Obviously, it's not a great place to be, but I would say also, minority government, like, I love minority government. I love the idea of minority government. Lots of voters do, right? They say, wow, it would be great if you guys would all just work together. And the reality is that the political games that get played make it very, very difficult.
But those games were played by Andrea Horwath at the end when she refused.
Sure.
To me, the odd thing was when she refused to meet Kathleen Wynne for a year while the Greens, the Tories were meeting with her, but she wouldn't. What I think was weird was when she didn't put the pension in the pension plan that she had herself proposed, a public plan 4 years ago, was absent from her platform, almost out of spite. It was just a bizarre maneuver.
Transit to me was that moment when she didn't come out in favor of
she did have a transit plan released actually before the election. So I think part of that is just a failure to communicate what your platform is. And as you did point out, and I think that was a very good point, you could have these little populist ideas, which are lovely and they work really well in like by-elections, but you need a grand narrative. You need to say, here's what we stand for. And by the way, we're also going to take the HST off hydro, right?
But to your point, I think the pursuit of progressive conservatives, while it was a gain on the ground, makes a lot of New Democrats nervous because it sometimes pushes the party out of shape.
But it is what maybe contributed to, frankly, defeating the Hudak Conservatives.
Sometime this fall, I think October, Paul, the NDP is going to have a leadership review. Is Andrea Horwath, in your view, in danger?
Oh, you're always in danger in a leadership review, even when you think you're not. John Tory can certainly tell you that from his leadership review and the unfortunate bar that Joe Clark set. Actually, I have thought very highly of Andrea Horwath when I watch her at Queen's Park. I think she's tremendously effective in the House, very good in the media scrums, but put her on a campaign and she just seems to sag. I don't see the same vibrant person.
Did you see it as different in the last campaign, though? Because I felt like in the last campaign, and maybe it was just because she was in contrast with the other two male leaders, frankly, she really kind of sparkled, right? But I felt like this campaign, it was a lot harder for her.
Well, and 2.5 years later, she was still using a teleprompter for the first 2 weeks of the campaign on the stump, not just for keynote speeches. And in question period, she's reading from her notes every single day after 4 years as leader.
She read from her notes in the close of the debate too, which indicates to me there's maybe an over-control that's going on there.
But she does seem to have, she does have it a lot. She's still a very popular leader.
Right,
the polling shows she is. People really connect with her.
And the thing is that the question on the leadership review is you can send a message to your leader, we're not happy with you, but the question also arises, well, if not you, who? And that can be a very awkward question to have to answer.
There is, Mara, nobody apparently waiting in the wings to take the job from her. Fair to say?
I think, at this point, after the results yesterday, I don't hear anybody dying for that role right now, and she did perform generally well. I mean, she lacks some popularity in those key ridings where we lost some seats. I mean, clearly that was an issue for us, but I think it's going to be, it'll be interesting to see. I think there's going to be a big think about what happened, and I don't know if it'll be leadership or maybe it's more about strategy and the direction we're taking. But if Andrea Horwath wants to be premier, which I believe she does, then that has to start now, and we have to think about how next time we can do it even better.
In any election campaign, when you're not successful, there are always people around who are eyeing the job to see whether or not they can make a run at it.
You want to name names?
No, I'm not that familiar with the NDP, and I don't think we need the legal action. So, but there are always people like that. Everyone has ambitions that go unfulfilled.
Yeah, but can I just say on the NDP, but also for the Tories, where the leader is already taking his leave, it isn't just the personality or the sparkle or the likability. It's who would be a good premier, and more importantly, what does the party stand for? It's not just the NDP that has to think about that. Also, the progressive conservatives who moved too far.
You do have to think about the sparkle, though. I think that's a big thing here. At this panel, when we started, you asked, what's this election going to be about? And everyone said jobs and the economy. But it is. It's about the personality. It's who do you believe? Who do you think is a good person? Who's going to execute their plan? And I think parties do need to think about that, right? Does this person make that connection? How do you make
Did I hear you out of the corner of my ear earlier saying you thought Horwath had to go?
Yes. Yeah.
You think she should step down?
I think she's done. I think you have to look at the opportunity for improvement, and I don't see it. Do you think she's going to be premier at this point?
I mean, I think you have to consider, though, that for the NDP, actually, these results are the best we've had in 25 years, right? Having said that, it's true. I think we're not the party that we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We're a party that wants to form government. You look at the way that Tom Mulcair and Jack Layton before him really professionalized the party federally, and I think that New Democrats in Ontario have higher expectations. We're going to be looking to make, if there is going to be change, and I don't know if that's change of the leader, but we are going to make sure that next time we don't make some of those same mistakes. Because, hey, look, we had an opportunity here. We didn't quite get it. But we do think that we still believe that we can actually form government one day, and it'll be good for Ontario.
Are you going to the leadership review in October?
Sure.
How will you vote?
I don't know. I'm gonna wait and see how things evolve. I really do think that after any election, and I would assume all the parties will do this. Maybe not. The Liberals have other issues now, but we're all going to be looking at our situation. Some of us have lost our leaders already, but we're going to be looking back. I would hope we would dissect the campaign, look at the preparation that happened and what didn't happen, and how we can do it better. And I think that work has to happen before that convention, or there will be questions
asked. That's why Andrea doesn't. I disagree. I don't think she needs to step down. What I do agree with is she needs to build a more professional campaign team structure around her, and I think that she was very courageous in taking some of the steps that she did in the policy directions, where she said, "No, I'm not going to the traditional hard left." She moved more to the center, and I know while it was very uncomfortable internally to have that letter sent from Michelle Landsberg and Jerry Kaplan and all that. And my reaction, being a right of center, is to say I would relook at Andrea Horwath as a direct result of that, the direct result of getting rid of the old war horses of the radical 60s left out of the NDP. I'm going.
And this is why this is why needs. Why aren't people coming? Why isn't the new guard coming to them?
I don't know. I can't answer that question, but there seems to be a barrier there where I don't know whether it's her opening up. I can't speak to that.
Okay, jumping in.
You've proven my case, though. You've made my case for me that if Andrea Horwath is appealing to you, then the 32 dissidents have a point.
Oh no, I'm not saying they didn't have a point. I'm just saying that if she wants to expand her base into other voters, that's the way to.
Speaker brings down the gavel. We got to move on because I don't want to run out of time to talk about the other huge story from last night, and that is, of course, the fate of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party right now. You talked to Tim Hudak since the results became known.
Yes.
How's he doing?
He's doing fine. And he's doing fine because He ran on the campaign that he wanted to run on to discuss the issues that he felt were important. If he had a vulnerability, it was candor, where he talked about things that made people feel uncomfortable, but he believes are necessary if Ontario is going to regain a stronger economy and have a brighter future.
So you're saying he was too honest in saying we're going to get rid of 100,000 public servants?
I think he was honest in saying he was going to downsize back to 2009 staffing levels, that he was going to reduce taxes, he was going to cut red tape and regulation, and these were used very effectively by his opponents as raising concerns within the public. All very legitimate, but nevertheless, this is the position he chose.
But wait a minute, that's not what he said. He didn't say what you just said. If he had said what you had just said,
he eventually did.
He might have been fine. It took him 2 weeks. It took him 2 weeks to climb down off that ledge. He very deliberately, your team very deliberately decided on 100,000 jobs, shock and awe strategy to get attention, to seize the agenda, to be the economics premier in waiting. And that's what backfired. So it wasn't just so much candor, it's the same number. You could have said, we're going to reduce the Ontario Public Service by 2% a year over 4 years through attrition, retirement, and contracting out, and a few terminations. That's different from...
I think that if you'd done that, the smart people over in the Liberal war room would have been out there with a calculator. He's going to fire 100,000 jobs, and we would have been there anyway.
So he said that's the Liberal war room.
He got out, or the smart economists
would have killed you instead of you guys committing suicide.
Well, I think it was important. It was important for Tim to get ahead of the number that he was going to be facing, which was 100,000. Could it have been put in a more kinder, gentler way by him? Sure, but I think we would have ended up at the same place.
I think ultimately, if he had just basically taken a softer line and said, I can manage your money, I can manage our money better than the rest, that might have worked for him. But I think that he undermined himself, not just with what you were speaking to, but also the million jobs notion, which, as a business person myself, I can tell you that Revenue Canada would have no sense of humor if I said that my 14 employees were actually 38, because I had them for the last 3.5 years. So if he was able to present himself at one point, and I think prior to the election, this is the positioning that he was attempting to use, and that is that he's going to be the better fiscal manager. But then, yeah, he, as you had just said, it was a shock and awe thing to put out the 100,000 immediate losses, backed up by poor math. And now how do you make that same claim?
Once again, let's take a look at the monitors here in the studio. I want to show you a map. This is a map that has had one little patch of blue on it at dissolution, and that was Doug Holliday. And then after last night's events, it is completely free of blue. In the last, now I'm going to do a math here, 23, 23, 23, and 23 gets up to, what is that, 94? In the last 4 general elections, the Tories have won 1 out of 94 seats, potentially, in Toronto. And now they have none again. This party is nowhere in the big cities of the province. Does this party even have a future anymore, Paul?
Oh, I think it always has a future.
Where's the evidence?
I have seen the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario counted out more than once. I've seen federal parties counted out as well. I think what's going to happen, and if there is one advantage to the majority for our party, is that it gives us 4 years to go through what you referred to as the big think. There is no need for the party to hurry into a leadership under the threat of the government falling. I think there will be a chance to recalibrate. But we went into the direction with John Tory, of someone who was from Toronto, who would know Toronto, who could successfully win seats here, and that wasn't successful.
Yeah, but
we went into a different direction, and that wasn't successful either. So there is I have no doubt, a formula in there, and the smart young people in the party are going to arrive at it.
Maybe that formula.
Let me go here, Martin, then we'll go around the table. Go ahead.
Well, I think that, obviously the Conservative campaign was a colossal failure, and when you look at Toronto, I mean, this is going to be an issue for Harper. I mean, we keep talking about this election. Now we're all going to start shifting our focus, I know I am, to the next federal election, and I think that this does not bode well for Stephen Harper as well, because let's face it, I mean, Tim Hudak went out there And what he did was he just focused on his base. He said what he thought they needed to hear and wanted to hear. Yeah. And he did it in a I mean, I have to say, though.
Do I call bull spit on this? This is the new NDP expression? Harper's got seats in Toronto already. Yes, it's a wholly different situation.
Well, I think that he's going to be worrying about this. I absolutely do. And Hudak, you know, as I was just saying, ultimately, you know, he decided to play to the base. And I'm assuming Harper will see this is not obviously working. I mean, we know that he's kind of softened things a little federally as well.
Okay, but here's the thing. The Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario today is a party that is older, whiter, more rural, and with less education than where the future of this province is going. That is a huge problem, is it not, Martin?
I think, Paul, to your point and yours, I think the Tories might have had the formula, the winning formula in the past under Bill Davis and even under John Tory, but they were out of phase. And John Tory had this catastrophic element of faith-based funding as opposed to faith-based cutting under Tim Hudak. But it's possible, as a thought experiment, that if John Tory had been leader this time, he might have beaten Kathleen Wynne this time. You know, we'll see in the mayoral election whether John Tory still has legs. But I don't think that centrist, center-right formula with an urban New Age leader, more or less, is a discredited formula. I think it's worth trying.
I think we're really underestimating what just happened. Like, to me, and I think Andrew Coyne said this last night, this is a massive repudiation of this conservative idea that we can cut our way to prosperity. I think that what happened, you can try and say, oh, it was just these external factors and it's our opposition using things, our weakness to our advantage. No, this is people saying, I don't think that's true. That's not how government works. That's not how I want my government to work. They believe, and I think really overwhelmingly, that they want government to invest in things. They want them to put the money where it's going to make a real difference. And they don't think that there's this magical equation that you can find the gravy or you can cut 100 jobs and suddenly everything's going to be okay. And that's what this is about. This is not about one guy and whether he, you know, tests well. This is about the people of Ontario saying the kind of government that they believe in.
I have to say, I mean, I agree with you in that. I think that ultimately, if the Conservatives don't look again at this more as a repudiation of those ideas, I mean, yeah, the slogan was silly. It was easily, like, he could have communicated it more effectively, but essentially it was the same thing. It would have been the same issue, and people rejected that. And I think that if I've actually been waiting, and I'm sure we will hear, you know, the usual, well, it was the unions, and it was ultimately, it was the failure of the policy that was being put forward.
Do you think today, Paul, that Progressive Conservative Party supporters have come to the conclusion that small c, conservative, Republican Tea Party style politics just isn't going to fly in the province of Ontario, and this party had better redefine what it means to be a progressive conservative going forward?
I'm not going to speak for the entire party, but we will let the entire party speak for itself in the upcoming leadership race, because there will be a wide range of candidates from all parts of the spectrum who will be offering themselves as leader. And when they do, the party will get to make that choice. And until then...
What do you think?
What do I think?
Your dad was a cabinet minister. You've known this province and this party for decades. Do they get the message yet that 70% of the people last night said we don't want a Tea Party in the province of Ontario?
Listen, I can't speak, as I said, for the party, but what I get out of my own reaction to this is that, look, there are big issues facing this province. And Tim Hudak was the only leader that came forward with a plan, whether you like it or not, that was prepared to deal with them. In Kathleen Wynne's case, and this is great, she's going to balance the budget in 3 years. The public service will be the same size as it is now. There will be a pension plan, and as someone who's getting near that age, I'm really looking forward to that. And all of these investments.
You don't qualify, Paul. You know that.
Oh gosh, oh gosh.
It's for your kids.
Now you tell people who are getting older that. There's a massive transit investment. And all of these things are going to occur. Balanced budget in 3 years, and no tax increases, or maybe little ones
there's tax increases in that budget.
A little on high income earners and aviation fuel for those of us that have an airplane. I don't. So in all this, and the budget's going to balance in 3 years, and I have absolute confidence that's going to happen to the same degree I'll find a unicorn on my front lawn.
Paul, do you think the fact that it's a majority government makes that more possible now?
I think that it's going to make it more possible for Kathleen Wynne to raise a variety of taxes that she probably wouldn't have raised in a minority situation.
I think the thing you've left out of that equation too is the part of that plan, the reason she's doing those things, she's not just giving everybody a unicorn for the sake of giving the unicorn. She's investing in those places because it's going to have a positive impact on their province. If she invests in manufacturing, we're going to see an increase in manufacturing. If we invest in education, we're going to see a decrease in our youth unemployment. She's doing those things because they're going to have long-term benefits.
Do you believe the budget will be balanced in 3 years?
I don't think that matters to me as much as the fact that my kids will be able to go to
Hang on.
But you know what, it is
one
going
at
to
a
make a
time. One at a
difference.
time. Can I just ask this? Now that she's got a majority, should she revisit that budget and make it tougher?
And make it tougher?
Dwight Duncan said here on this program last night, that was a good campaign document from which I inferred it really wasn't a serious budget.
Yeah.
Do you think she should she's got a chance now with a majority to tweak that budget to make it tougher if it needs to?
I think she should think about it, yeah. Like, I think she should take that time and seriously think about what do I want to do and how do I want to do it. And she has that leisure now. She would never take the leisure, but I think she should think about it. I'm not saying she should do it, but I think she should look at it seriously because it's gonna set the path and it's gonna have some important implications.
I think we're into overtime on the budget. I don't think it's realistic to expect this budget to be changed, even though Dwight might be fantasizing about that.
But next year?
I think next year is a good opportunity to steal yet again an NDP idea and raise the corporate tax by 1 percentage point and tell business once again it's a way to fight the deficit. And I think it's a good opportunity next year to revisit perhaps a tuition credit that captures, I think, about 80% of people are qualifying for that 30% rebate. Maybe we need to scale it back.
But unfortunately, I mean, and this is the problem, we know that the problem with the current scenario where we have a Liberal majority is that they aren't going to have the NDP in that position where we can actually push for those things.
Yeah, but they'll have the time to do it themselves.
You know what?
There are smart people in there.
They'll have the bond rating agencies after them.
Well, but
they'll get it done.
We've seen, where are they going to find? How are they going to pay for everything? Because as we've seen, when they run on the left, and they certainly did in this case, and that's great. I like to see some of these progressive ideas. I hope they get implemented. But at the end of the day, I'm not convinced that they'll go that route. I think they could also go the route of cuts. Right? I think that we could be facing serious layoffs.
Well,
they have said that.
They've said in the budget, and 800 million cut coming in year 3.
Absolutely, and I think that's what we probably are most likely to see, and I think we will see some labor strife as well as a result of that.
There's a point about the bond rating agencies that one of the things that they like most is stability. So she may get a little slack because there's a majority government in place. They might not be rushing to downgrade as quickly as they would otherwise. But the fact is that if you're going to raise taxes, if you're going to take that aviation gas tax and put it on motor vehicle tax, if you're going to lower the threshold for high income earners from 250 to 150, if you're going to perhaps put an extra point on the HST, do it early and get the benefits of the revenue, and then at the same time provide some relief in your last year. If you're going to tax in a majority, if you're going to do it hard, fast, and often. It is a shock to me that in 2007, Dalton McGuinty did not take back those 2 points on the HST that Stephen Harper gave out.
Yeah.
Well, he harmonized, though, so he used that as an opportunity to harmonize.
But still taking those 2 points if I'd been McGuinty.
Yeah, but at least we're not going to see a corporate tax cut from 11.5% to 8%, which wouldn't have done us any good.
Right. Can I? Let me put a couple more issues on the table in the time remaining that we have. I have received numerous emails during the course of the 40-some-odd day campaign from people saying, you really need to look into this business of whether or not the Liberal Party of Ontario, how deeply in cahoots with the public sector unions they were. They advertised for her, they destroyed HUDAC for her, they're going to expect a payoff. What's that going to look like? Siri, got an answer?
What are you asking me?
What's that going to look like? Is there a quid pro quo for all of that advertising that the public sector unions did to destroy HUDAC and help win-win?
I think that they've already had the payoff that she's won, right? I think that
they're going to expect
the
more than
idea
that.
I don't know. To me, I find it really interesting, and with the journalists union, I found it really interesting that people think that these unions are operating for some weird nefarious goal. They want to take care of their members. They want to make sure that there's a pension plan. They want to make sure that there's a government that cares about people and investing in the right places. I think that's a payoff for them. I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but I don't think that there's anything more.
You don't think they expect better settlements, higher salary increases, better pension plans, et cetera, et cetera?
I'm sure they would love that, but I don't know that that's a guarantee. I don't see why that would be a guarantee. I think they have the mechanisms in place. Our premier is a big process woman. She's going to say, go out there and negotiate those contracts and let's talk about it and put it on the table.
I don't know that I understand the premise, though, that the union advertising destroyed Tim Hudak. Not to be argumentative, I think Tim Hudak destroyed himself, and his plan destroyed Tim Hudak. But even if we look at the ads and the support they got on the ground and the endorsements and so on, I think we can look back at past performance when Dalton McGuinty, who originated this union liberal coalition a few years ago, went after them on restraint. I mean, just ask the teachers' unions, just ask OPSU. Look at Smokey Thomas or Robinson. I always mix them up. Apologies.
Smokey Robinson, same good song.
Motown, and Motown is my favorite. But the fact is that the Liberals did tangle with the unions, and they lost by-elections as a result. So I don't think that you can make that direct connection between the two.
Paul, do you think, how influential were all of those public sector unions in the Tory defeat last night?
I think they were significant. Now, I did not raise the issue, but our rules allow third-party advertisers to run attack ads against a targeted candidate in amounts far in excess of what parties can spend. If I've got $10 million hanging around, which I wish I had, I could be buying attack ads against anybody under the Ontario election rules. You can't do that federally. And you see a different result in this province between the two campaigns. On a straight spending model between what our party spent and what the collective parties, including the union, spent, was approximately 4 to 5 to 1, depending on how you're measuring it. If you put me into a campaign in any jurisdiction whatsoever, and I can out-advertise you 5 to 1, I will win. I will win each and every time.
They were talking about.
Well, I mean, to be fair, and again, I think that Tim Hudak and the Conservative Party cannot blame these outside forces for this defeat.
No, I don't think it's a matter of blaming.
But I hear what you're saying.
To suggest that it's not a factor
is it may be a factor, but consider for a moment as well how much money has gone in to support and to make other kinds of arguments over many years by business, by corporate forces. Unions came together on behalf of working people. In this case, they're supporting the Liberals. They've supported the NDP many times. OPSU actually was very strongly supporting Andrea Horwath, and I hope that they don't pay for that in negotiations with the Liberals coming up, but I think it was a sign of where they saw this government going, because they've been the ones feeling the crunch of this government, the minority Liberal government, and the cuts that they've been making behind the scenes for the last 3 years, and they see what's coming. They know that they're going to pay the price.
Both my daughters saw most of the ads. They're 10 and 11 years old, and their verdict, cheesy. So I just can't believe, they're not voters yet, but I just can't believe they were that persuasive.
That's your focus group.
Correct.
That's a pretty good focus group. That's a pretty good focus group. Okay, 2 minutes to go. I want to ask about the Greens.
Sure.
Does the Green Party have a future in the province of Ontario?
Well, so our vote totals went up. We were the only party that actually saw an increase in net percentage of vote. That's positive. I think that if you were to ask us that same question on May 11th, we would have gone in here saying that our hope and expectation is that we could aim for 1, maybe 3 seats, Mike Schreiner's being one of those in Guelph. What we did get out of it, and I'll focus specifically on Guelph and Mike Schreiner, is that we tripled our vote.
He came third in Guelph.
He did come third, but a hair out of second, and tripled our vote. We went from roughly 1,000 to 5,000 contact base. 500 volunteers, a number of things that for us are significant. We also learned a little bit more about how to play the game. We had for the first time the ability to pour all of our resources into one riding, which gave us insights that we didn't previously have. And so one example would be prior to the writ, we were actually at 14%. Mike was pretty far back in 4th place. And we finished at 20%. So
in Guelph?
In Guelph, yeah. So what we can see is that when, especially in a small community like that, where there is local media and we're not shut out, as is more commonly the case at the provincial and regional level, and we're seen then at the same level as the other candidates, in fact maybe a little bit advanced with it being the leader, we actually have a real prospect there.
Do you know if he wants to stay on as leader?
I hope that he wants to stay on as leader. Certainly when he chose to run in Guelph, his initial commitment was that he was going to do this until it was proven impossible, and I don't think that's yet the case.
Gotcha.
Or winnable.
Can I say something really quickly on
You
this?
got 20 seconds.
I don't think we should ever be discouraging anybody to not put their name forward or not put their party forward in any election. I think in municipal elections, I'm tired of people saying, oh, it's hopeless, you shouldn't do it. I think we should be encouraging every party, every voter.
Well, the encouragement would be if all three of your parties actually force the media to allow Mike Schreiner to enter.
It's the media show. But listen, I think the Green Party is an important voice in our society, whether it has a seat or not, and one worth paying attention to.
As are all of yours, but sadly we're out of time. Guys, thank you so much for coming in on the day after for this postmortem. It's been great to have you here. We'll do it again.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.